Every movie ever made is one of 10 stories. Not 10 genres. 10 stories. A working screenwriter named Blake Snyder spent 20 years proving it, film by film, with a stopwatch running and a yellow legal pad on his knee. He got his proof. It cost him something he badly wanted to keep believing. He wanted one key that would open every movie ever made. Everyone knows movies repeat themselves. You have sat in a dark theater, guessed the ending 20 minutes in, been right, and stayed anyway. But nobody can tell you what is actually repeating. It isn't the subject, it isn't the tone, it isn't the category printed on the poster. It is something underneath all three. Something that makes a shark movie and a spaceship movie the same movie. Snyder said he found it. Then he went and counted it. Start with him losing. Young Blake Snyder gets a meeting with a studio executive. He has washed his face. He has brushed his teeth. He walks in wearing his best personality and carrying what he called an idea and maybe a few cool scenes, and it does not work. His own phrase for what followed: "These meetings were short." He had a hero. He had a poster. He had jokes. He had no answer at all when someone across a desk asked what happens next. 4 words in his own account: "I had no plot." And the worst part was that both people in the room worked it out at the same moment. He could have gone on having short meetings for the rest of his life. Plenty of people do. Therefore, a parking lot in Santa Barbara. Snyder is on a break from a script, standing outside his father's office with his writing partner Jim Hagen. Hagen is smoking a Lucky Strike, and Hagen says it the way you'd mention the weather. Did you know that Alien and Jaws are the same movie? Snyder didn't see it. One is a shark off a summer beach. The other is a starship somewhere in space. So Hagen laid it out. A creature with power that shouldn't exist. A sealed place nobody can walk out of. And a sin, greed, that let the thing in. Same movie. So how many movies are there, really? Not how many get released. How many actually exist, underneath? Snyder had no idea. But he had just been handed a way to find out, and no clue how to use it. Because what happened next was not a revelation. It was a humiliation. Another meeting. Another executive, charming, entirely unimpressed, who asked him what his break into 2 was. He didn't know what those 3 words meant. Not a clue. She let the silence do its work, then hinted that the mysterious Syd could explain it to him. A stranger had just informed him that his own craft had a vocabulary he'd never heard. So he found Syd Field's book, Screenplay, and learned that a film has 3 acts and that the second one starts around minute 25. And then Snyder did what anybody does with a shiny new fact. He took it on a date. Picture it. Dark theater. He checks his watch, leans over, and whispers to the woman beside him. "See! Act break!" Cute. Useless. Knowing where the wall is doesn't tell you how to build the room. In his words, there was a lot of empty space in between. He could have waited for somebody else to fill that space. Therefore, he didn't. Snyder started watching movies with a stopwatch. Hundreds of them. Marking on a legal pad the exact minute each thing happened, and why. What he found in the empty space has names now. Let me explain. But set him aside for a minute. Across town, a producer named Sheila Hanahan Taylor has a completely different problem. She isn't trying to write anything. She reads projects, pitches, people, all day, every day. And what she keeps meeting is talent with no traction, real voices, beautiful ones, and no way to survive a development meeting. She said it out loud to a coworker years before any of this. Until someone takes the time to help filmmakers see the bones of storytelling from the buyer's point of view, she said, we'll continue to meet writers with great voices, but no real chops for surviving in Hollywood. Bones. not rules. She wanted somebody to hand both sides of the desk the same X-ray. Nobody had. Hold on to that. Therefore, the 10. Snyder's claim is that if you stop sorting films by tone and subject, comedy, drama, western, thriller, and sort them instead by what actually happens to the person inside them, you get 10 piles. Only 10. And every pile has exactly 3 moving parts. The one Hagen found in that parking lot he called Monster in the House. A monster, a house, and a sin. The monster needs power that shouldn't exist. Lesser monsters equals lesser movies, Snyder wrote, which is why the thing on the starship terrifies and the spider in the bathtub doesn't. The house needs to seal. The more cramped the space, he wrote, the better. And somebody has to have let the thing in. In Jaws, it's a town keeping the beaches open for summer money. In Fatal Attraction, the house isn't a house at all. It's a marriage. Golden Fleece. A road, a team, a prize. Jason and the Argonauts becomes the bad news, Bears becomes Ocean's 11. And the prize is always a decoy. It's what we learn about ourselves along the way. Out of the bottle. A wish, a spell, a lesson. One warning under all of them. Be careful what you wish for. Rites of passage. A life problem, the wrong way to fix it, and acceptance. Buddy love, an incomplete hero, the counterpart who completes him, and the complication keeping them apart. One sentence covers every version. My life changed for having known another. Titanic. Lethal Weapon. A boy and a horse. Why Dunit? A detective, a secret, and a dark turn. The moment the investigator breaks a rule and becomes part of the crime he's solving. Snyder's line for the whole category is the sharpest thing in the book. There is no mystery. There is only revelation. Institutionalized. A group, a choice, a sacrifice. The question underneath all of them: who's crazier, them or me? Then Dude with a Problem, which he and a screenwriter named Mike Chetta named at 40 years old because they could not stop calling each other Dude. Then Fool Triumphant. Then Superhero. 10 piles. 50 films to prove it. And he intended to run every one of them the same way. Timer, yellow pad, mark the minute, mark the reason. Here is where it stops being tidy. Because to defend a pile you have to defend its edges, and the edges kept moving. Gladiator and the Lion King came out of the same pile. A power, a nemesis, a curse, which sounds absurd until you check the beats, and then it's simply true. Fine. Chalk that up as a win. But there was one film he could not sort at all. Bruce Joel Rubin wrote it. Jerry Zucker directed it. It was called Ghost, and it had a piece of 4 different piles in it. He set it aside. But in 2005, the 10 piles became a book, Save the Cat. The last book on screenwriting you'll ever need. And it sold, and it kept selling, and Blake Snyder stopped being a screenwriter with a theory and became an authority. Which is when the opposing force noticed. Not critics, students. Sheila Hanahan Taylor was teaching in the producing program at UCLA by then, and her students read the book and refused it. Snyder's own description of what came back is worth slowing all the way down for, because it is a very strange thing for a best-selling author to say about his own readers. Some of them, he wrote, couldn't, or wouldn't, believe it held for all movies. Wouldn't. Not couldn't follow, wouldn't accept. And that distinction is the entire story, because what they were refusing was never a filing system. It was the suggestion that the thing they were about to spend their 20s on, their voice, their vision, the film only they could make, already had a shape, and the shape was old, and it was one of 10. So they asked for proof. Therefore, he had to go and get it. 50 films, 10 categories, 5 apiece, everyone broken down beat by beat, roughly 3 pages each. The plan was simple, which is always how you know it's going to hurt. Divvy up the list, he takes 2 or 3, A partner takes 2 or 3. Screen them with a timer and a yellow pad. Mark where every beat falls. Write it up. And behind him, a researcher named Naomi Beatty, whom he described as the one person I can email at 3 a.m. to ask who said what when in nearly any movie. Because at some point, that is when the emails were going out. And the categories started leaking. First plank. A monster in the house requires a sin. Somebody has to have let the thing in. Then he reaches Saw, and The Grudge, and American Psycho, where nobody sins at all. The people are just there. So either the rule was wrong or the rule needed a trap door, and Snyder cut one. He called it the sin of ignorance. Ordinary people blithely going along, and then dropped into an evil world that had been running the whole time without them. Read that back as a description of the audience. Second plank. The half-man, the survivor who met the monster once before and came away damaged. Quint in Jaws. Scatman Crothers in The Shining. Ash in Alien. Snyder noticed they nearly all die in the same place, around page 75. And then he noticed why. They exist to tell you what dealing with the monster costs, and then to demonstrate it. The mentor is the warning. The mentor is also the corpse. Third plank, and this is the one that gets him. If the beats are that reliable, if you can predict the death of a wise man by page number, then what, precisely, is the writer contributing? He kept counting anyway. And somewhere in the counting, it died. Not the system. The system was fine. What died was the exact thing those students had been defending. Whenever I hear someone insist that his story is original, I have to laugh, Snyder wrote. Fresh, I hope. Original? No such thing. He wasn't sneering at them. He was including himself. 20 years of scripts, a hit for Disney, a sale to Spielberg, and the verdict is that he never once made anything new. Neither has anyone. We have already heard every story ever told. The man who went looking for the key found out there was no lock. Sit in that, because it is genuinely bleak if you stop there. Everything you will ever write has been written. Every turn you think is yours was worn smooth by somebody at a fire a very long time ago, and it worked then for the same reason it works now. Snyder's image for it is children. Little kids, he says, ask for the same story over and over, told exactly the same way, and they get furious if you change a single word. They aren't being simple. They're responding to something older than they are. Patterns, he says, sitting deep in our DNA. What all of us are reaching for, in his words, is a story that satisfies some pre-thinking part of the soul. Pre-thinking. Before you decided anything. Before you had a voice to lose. Therefore, Sheila. Her line was never teach them the rules. It was bones. Bones from the buyer's point of view. A shared X-ray. And that reframes the entire thing, because a skeleton is not a cage. It is the reason you can stand up. Go back to the young man in the short meeting who had no plot. His problem was never a shortage of originality. He had originality coming out of his ears. What he lacked was a word for the thing the executive was asking him about. He couldn't name his own gap, so he could not close it. Snyder didn't build a formula. He built a vocabulary. Then he handed it to both sides of the desk. So he assembles it. 10 chapters, 50 films, everyone timed and beaten out, plus the writing partners he calls the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the people he says taught him everything. And by the back half of the writing he is, in his own phrase, deep in my aren't I a genius, megalomania, which is precisely the tone of voice the universe waits for. Ghosts comes on television. He isn't working. He's watching Patrick Swayze and Demi Moore, cavorting ex corpus, as he puts it, and his life's work comes apart in real time. Because Ghost is supernatural, which makes it out of the bottle. It's a love story, which makes it buddy love. Patrick is dead and cannot go to the light until he finishes his unfinished business, which makes it rites of passage. And somebody murdered him, which makes it a mystery. 4 piles. 1 film. A film he could have watched on any given night for years, sitting there dismantling a system he had almost finished proving. Suddenly my brain exploded. But he doesn't throw it out. He sits there, and his word simmers down, and asks the only question that can save him. Not which 4 is it? Not what's in the movie. What is the movie about? Take out the ghost. Take out the romance. What is left standing? A man trying to find out who killed him, and why. It's a whodunit. A detective, a secret, a dark turn. A fantasy whodunit, he decided, in the very same league as The Sixth Sense. The system held. But that was not the win, and he knew it. The win was that he'd been able to have the argument at all, that 4 people watching the same film could now disagree about it in the same language. That was always the actual product, not a rule. A word for the thing. There is a theater on State Street in Santa Barbara called the Arlington. Snyder grew up going to it. Spanish motif, like the rest of the town. Chalky adobe walls with purple shadows painted onto them. A rim of red tile roofing overhead, so you're sitting in an open-air plaza that isn't outside. And above all of it, a cavernous ceiling covered in hundreds of pinlights that mimic stars. The same town as the parking lot. The stars dim, the velvet curtains part, and the man who can tell you to the minute everything that is about to happen scrunches down in his seat and thinks, "This is going to be good." One thing he kept in his back pocket, and it is the fastest story test ever written. Before you build anything, a film, a pitch, a toast, an email you're frightened of, ask Snyder's 4-word question. Would a caveman understand? If yes, you have a story. If no, you have information. And near the end, he stops being a technician for exactly 1 sentence. The only thing stopping the stories from getting out is you.